Try that again. What is happening out there, rotoscouts baseball fans? Welcome to a Wednesday show, gang. A little casual 5-gamer today, nothing crazy. It was a big early slate this afternoon, but prize pools weren't all that crazy. Everything was focused on this 5-gamer as the main slate today, so we're taking a look at this one. But hopefully anybody that played that one had good luck out there. Hopefully we had some winners yesterday. Know that we came through on a lot. Our Arizona stack just absolutely obliterated the board. Put up, 14 runs? Three homer game out of Eugenio Suarez. Had him in my lineup. Cashed. Didn't have the greatest second stack. Mets didn't really come through for us, unfortunately. Was kind of regretting not going with the Mariners and a higher-end pitcher, which was my other consideration, because the Mariners came through pretty well. But a little cash. Not bad. Cujo Blues in the chat. What's going on, Cujo? Good to see you, buddy. Handful of other people trickling in. Late starting show for a short slate. Might be a small crowd today, but it's an interesting one to talk through. It's not a bad-looking board. There's some decent pitching. There's some really good-looking spots for offense. So we'll just kind of dive on in. Anybody watching the Olympics this afternoon out there? Got a lot of swimming going on today. Just watched Katie Ledecky in her race. I won't spoil it for anybody planning on watching in the evening. But it's been a fun day of swimming out in over in Paris. I was watching super early this morning the women's triathlon, swimming down the Seine and then biking a few miles. And it was a rainy day, so they kept on wiping out on the wet pavement and the lane lines and everything. So it was kind of a wild triathlon. That was at like 4 a.m. So anyway, taking a look at the board as everybody wanders into the room. Cubbies and the Reds up top, 9.5 run total. That's our biggie. It's Nick Lodolo going for the Reds. It's Kyle Hendricks going for the Cubs. 4.38 implied total for Chicago. 5.24 implied total for a pretty good-looking Red squad that I'm sure is going to be the most popular team on the entire slate. They ranked out at the top of my board. I would imagine they're ranked at the top of most boards around baseball today. Pirates and the Astros. Framber Valdez looking like a very, very solid pitching option going up against the Pittsburgh Pirates. Pirates probably going to have Brian De La Cruz, the new acquisition, in the lineup today. He's available on the DraftKings slate. At last check, he was not added to the team on FanDuel, which is kind of a shame. You figure the one day you could have been on top of trades and making the additions to the teams that were going to be on your short 5-game main slate would be trade deadline day, but I guess they couldn't manage to get that done. So that's annoying, but Framber looks like a great spot, and the Astros going up against Jake Woodford also look like a pretty primo spot for some offense. 4.79 implied total for them. Dodgers and the Pods, 3.34 implied total. Low end total for the Dodgers. Are going up against Dylan Cease. It's that greatly diminished version of the Dodgers lineup that we've seen recently. Just a 7-run total for the game overall because it's Clay Kershaw on the other side for the Dodgers. Got him around 75 pitches. I think that's probably what we're getting. Maybe we get the 5th inning out of him, but they're kind of easing him back in. It's been a minute for Clay Kershaw. He went 4 innings in his first outing back. That was against the Giants. He struck out 6, gave up 2 earned on 6 hits, faced 20 hitters. So you figure there's a 5th inning in there if all goes well. Just wasn't completely sharp between the hits and the a pair of walks and the runs. But not a bad outing overall, and we could get a little bit more today. But the Pods, tough opponent, low strikeout team as usual. 3.73 implied total for them. The Rockies and the Angels, kind of an interesting one here. 8.5 run total, the second highest total on the board. You can see a lot of it pushing toward the Angels. 4.61 implied total for them. The Rockies, just a shade under 4. But I'm kind of intrigued by the Rockies bats. There's some bats that we like on that team. I made Michael Talia the home run pick of the day just because I can't stop talking about all the power that he's got. Davis Daniel on the mound for the Angels, pretty gettable. Gave up 7 earned to Texas his last time out. Gave up 4 earned at the Athletics start before that. Had 1 good outing, went 8 innings against Detroit in his first start, but eminently gettable, even for a scuffling Rockies team. But it is, again, the Rockies on the road against a righty. I told you guys at the very beginning of the year we would talk about the Rockies a little bit more this season, and we have been. Hit and miss, but there are some interesting bats on that team, even on the road here. Angels bats are definitely intriguing with their big total, but I feel like they're going to be a lot more popular. They're going up against Kyle Freeland. Freeland definitely did not come through after we talked about a little bit of ability to pitch deep into a ball game the last time out. Gave up 6 earned runs to San Francisco at San Francisco. Did strike out 8 in that game, but gave up 2 home runs, 8 hits overall, so that one didn't really play. I don't think we're going to tangle with it on that side with the Angels pulling down a pretty solid-looking total, but they're not the most threatening team in the world either. The Athletics, really low total at 3.16. They're going up against Logan Webb. Absolutely love Logan Webb as a pitching option. Giants facing Ross Stripling, pulling a 4.43 implied total. Not uninteresting there. One of the higher-ranked teams on the board. Just a 7.5 run total. It's a San Francisco game, so you know what that comes with typically on when we get out to San Fran in that pitcher-friendly conditions. But that's a solid enough run total, and there's some interesting bats in the San Francisco lineup. Not the deepest slate for offense. Only one team over 5, and then just a 4-7, 4-7s, and a 4-6. Out of our 10 available teams, we've got, 5 of them sub 4. So it's an interesting board. Sort that by DK. Top of the board, Dylan Cease. Only potentially limited, with the top of that Dodgers lineup at this point. It's not even, it's like a 3-man lineup that's threatening it now. And maybe you throw Gavin Lux, who somebody in chat mentioned yesterday that he'd been on a surge, and I went to pull it up, and then we got sidetracked. I think that was when the Jack Flaherty news dropped, so we never actually looked at it. But maybe you count him as like a little bit of a threat, but Cease is super high end. Very good strikeout pitcher. Very expensive, $11,000 on the FanDuel slate, $9,700 on the DraftKings slate. But with a team like the Rockies on the board, team like the Angels on the board, seems like it should be easy enough to reach up to even that extreme price level. I expect Cease will be pretty popular tonight. Logan Webb at $9,000, $9,600, a very solid $2,000 discount for a very, very good pitcher against the Athletics. That's definitely worth considering. You get him $500 less than Framber Valdez against the Pirates. They're very closely projected, but I kind of prefer Webb just based on the matchup. That Pirates team a little bit more frisky probably. I like Framber a lot, don't get me wrong, and I love those pitchers like him and Webb who just keep the ball on the ground, dramatically limit home run upside, particularly against a team like Oakland that kind of thrives on the long ball in a lot of ways. Definitely like the upside for a pitcher like that who's going to keep the ball down. And it's the same for Framber. He could absolutely keep the ball in the yard and find some Ks against the Pirates. I like the price, $8,900 and $8,600 for those two pitchers. They're going to be neck and neck on the DraftKings slate as well. Both of those prices are well under. Honestly, the Logan Webb price is a little bit silly at this point. Nick Lodolo, just a tough spot against a middle-of-the-road kind of a Cubs team that definitely can get on base. He cost $9,200, which fits into the pricing with the guys immediately above him, but you can see a little bit of a gap in the projections there. We have a pretty big total on the board for Chicago. I kind of could see the Cubs offense coming through and doing some damage, but on the right day, Lodolo definitely has the upside to win this slate for the price. Kershaw, I think, is correctly priced for the 75, 80 pitches that we'll probably get, the potential to get 5 innings out of him, but not much more. It's one of those days where it's just like you can get that, and maybe you can get yourself to like 30 FanDuel points, 15 DK points, and that would be your upside day. He does not have ceiling beyond that because he's not going to see the pitch count. Davis Daniel against Colorado. Again, that's a spot I'm looking at with the Colorado bats to get a little different, a little cheap, and a little frisky. But he's showing just as much upside as Kershaw is with a little bit more, realistic ceiling because he doesn't have an artificial pitch count. 7,500, 7,700. If he's finding his Ks against that Rockies team, and we know that they can give up Ks, that is a very good mid-range price. Freeland at similar pricing against the Angels on FanDuel, not all that appealing. At $6,000 on DraftKings, we will have to talk about it again, unfortunately. Russ Stripling is kind of a no against San Francisco, 65 on both sites, feels pretty weak. Hendo, pretty big no against Cincinnati, and Woodford against Houston is definitely a pretty dramatic no. So the slate definitely gets short right around here. I think he's your last even decent option. This is a pretty rough option, especially here. Here it's okay just because of the price. And then 3 pretty firm no's down boards. So you're dealing with a short pitching slate. That's kind of reflective of the slate overall. Mamba's here. What's going on, Mamba? Hit that like button. I appreciate that, buddy. Oh, you threw me off there. You were talking to 8 game, and he spells 8 out, and you put 8 game, and I was like, wait, did I miss something where DraftKings is starting early, including earlier games? Scared me there for a second. 8 games here, though. 8 game. Pink hand wave back to you, buddy. Good to see you. On the way home right now. Chilling with Terry. I love it. Lone Wolf's here. Monty Pritchett. Good to see you. It's a great day to be alive on planet Earth and a great day for baseball. Absolutely. I'm with you. The Brobarian. First time here. Welcome. Glad you found your way here, buddy. Welcome, welcome. Hopefully you take some good stuff out. Spread the word. Come on back. Hit the subscribe bell while you're here. That way you know when these shows go live. Usually we're going around 3:15, 3:30. Went a little late today just because of the short slate. We can dive in through this and we can get through it. If you're not familiar with our shows, we go pretty deep. We talk for quite a while and we go into all the different corners of this stuff. So this won't be a short show, but it'll be a shorter show than most of our usual ones. So this first game up, we do have a little bit of rain in the area. Taking a look at Mr. Roth, our friendly DFS weatherman's report, last update over at RG. Yellow-orange on his board. He's saying basically a lot of nasty storms in the area. You just kind of got to watch the radar as we get toward game time, and if one of them pops over the stadium, we might be in trouble. Fortunately, I think I'm only looking at the bats in this one. I do think Lodolo's playable, but on a slate like this, if I can get away from one of these pitchers, it's probably going to be him, especially with the weather concerns. Even if the game plays, you could have a big chance of delay in there, and that could absolutely screw up his day. For this season, he's made 16 starts, 91 and a third, pretty solid 24.6% strikeout rate, a 6.8% walk rate, 3.45 ERA against a 3.84 xFIP, a little bit bumpier under the covers than he is on the surface, but no issues with the 3.84. Has been good at limiting premium contact and power, but not elite at it. He's keeping the ball down to an okay 10.6 degree average launch, 7.7% barrels, 38 and change hard hits, and 89 miles an hour of exit velo. All of that's okay. 2.62% home run rate is about right for those numbers. It could be a little bit higher, could be over 3 with those numbers, but all of that is non-tragic. You can see that he's rated out well by stuff. Plus, a very, very solid strike thrower, 12.2% swinging strikes, 29% CSW. He's going up against a Cubs team that does have some strikeouts in it, but they're not egregiously bad. The interesting thing about the matchup, though, is some of their better bats and their more threatening bats. Patty Wisdom, Seiya Suzuki, Ian Happ. I can't throw Dansby Swanson in with the performance so far this year, but historically Dansby Swanson. But all 3 of the other guys, pretty high strikeout this year, 32, 8, 27, 3, and 26.4%. Those numbers are way up for both Suzuki and Ian Happ. It's within expectation. It's actually down a few points for Patty Wisdom. Vinny Pasquantino home run for Seth, who was complaining that he sucks. Just reply to him in the Discord there. Jump into our Discord if you're new here as well. I'll drop a link into the chat. So while I do think, again, Lodolo is playable and all of those are very good numbers, there's just based on the ballpark, based on the run total, based on the conditions, there's enough reason to just think that he's not the best play here. And you can see with the Cubbies, they do have a lot of on-base skills. Even with some up and down performances through the year, through the heart of the lineup, there's a lot of good on-base performers. A lot of good table setters. There's a decent stretch of power through here. Everybody runs at least a little bit. You've got some solid run creators, but you've got some gaps in there. Top of the board, if this is the version of the lineup that they put out. Let me see if we got it confirmed in, actually. Jordan Westberg fractured his hand, by the way, if you're an Orioles fan. Kind of sucks. They've got the depth to cover it, of course. But I don't know if that had happened. Would they have traded Connor Norby yesterday? Toughest pitcher on the board yesterday, and they lit him up. Freeland Daniels load up, says Lone Wolf. That's one way to go. Not a comfy way to go, but it's definitely one way to go. So no lineup in yet for the Cubs, but if we get this version of it, they're definitely playable. I like the power stretch through the middle. The addition of Isaac Paredes in the middle of that lineup is kind of interesting, and it's a very hitter-friendly ballpark. On the other side, Kyle Hendricks is just a pretty hard no at this point. 6.95 ERA with a 4.45 xFIP. Yes, this is 2.5 runs lower, but it's still not appealing. Not for a guy with a 15.9% strikeout rate, 7.7% swinging strikes, nearly a 1.5 whip. He's given up a 4.55% home run rate, despite being pretty good at limiting premium contact, limiting exit velo, soft thrower, soft contact, soft pitch coming in, soft contact going out a lot of the time. You saw that in the home run derby. They were talking about it. If they, when those guys are throwing 50 miles an hour, you gain something like 10 feet of distance for every 10 miles an hour. I forget what the equation was. That wasn't it. But there's some distance gain 2 miles an hour on the pitch coming in equation where there's a balance point. And the point they were making in the home run derby was these guys should have their pitchers not throw just total soft toss little league batting practice. They should throw legit batting practice pitches, throw in the 70s and the 80s or whatever, and gain a little bit of velo because you'll gain distance on those home run balls. It's the same thing in practice with a soft tosser like Kyle Freeland. It's a little bit more difficult to generate hard hits and exit velo against a pitcher like this, but even with that, he's been ugly for home runs against this year at 4.55. Last year it was 2.25, the year before 4.21. So it comes and goes. That's basically just when he makes mistakes. How far are those mistakes traveling? How bad are those mistakes? And this year they've been really bad. Super gettable pitcher. A lot of reason to play the Reds lineup. If you're going to the Cubs, Nico off the top is at least an on-base and correlated scoring option, but he really hasn't done that all that effectively this season. 16 steals with a 3.25 on base. Pretty mediocre performance out of Nico so far, just a 92 WRC plus, so he's been 8% worse than average for run creation. Not a great option, but he's not expensive if you just want to start a stack at the top of the lineup if that's where he's hitting. We've seen him move around a little bit in the last couple of games. If he pops back up there against the lefty, 41 at second base, 28 second base shortstop, not a terrible way to start a stack. Patty Wisdom I like a lot. I love the premium contact upside. I love the power upside. Just a 7.78 in the home run model. He's a little bit diminished by back-end projections at this point just because he's not getting many plate appearances, so it doesn't total out to the same type of potential. But when he is in the lineup, you can just go by the premium contact over the last few years. Just absolute masher. 14.9% barrel rate, 44.8% hard hits this year. Those are way down in a very small sample of 116 plate appearances from the 19.5, 54.7 that he had last year. But there's a ton of power-based upside for Patrick Wisdom on any given slate when he's in the lineup. I would expect him today against the lefty. 233 ISO, 6 homers in his 116 chances. Seiya Suzuki, a very good right-handed power bat, 11.6% barrels and nearly 50% hard hits. A 9.18 leads the team in the home run model today. 15 homers, 10 steals, a 209 ISO, 129 WRC plus, over 362 plate appearances. Having a great year at the plate. Very, very solid righty hitter. Like him a lot if you're going to the Cubs. Isaac Paredes definitely would not skip. 4,532, 116 home runs on the season, a 188 ISO, 128 WRC plus. We'll see how the power numbers hold up now that he's not in Tampa Bay anymore. I mean, he was benefiting from that ballpark a little bit, just given where he hit the ball and where most of those home runs went. But he does have a little bit of pop. He is a realistic option, and he's not at all expensive. 4,500, 3,200. We'll see if he continues to defy expectations, X-Stats, StatCast, and so on. Cody Bellinger, 55.29. Bouncing along this season, 272, 333, 429, a 149 ISO, a 111 WRC plus. The WRC plus, great. He's got 10 home runs on the board. Limited for premium contact, but kind of always has been. He's low strikeout, medium walk rate, so he gets involved a lot. 333 on base is pretty solid. And we know he's got more upside than this for power, for premium contact, for extra base hit power. The 149 ISO is below expectation, but a good player. The 55 isn't a great price on DraftKings, but with everybody around him in the 3s and the 4s, it doesn't really matter if you're just looking at the average price that you spend across multiple positions in your stack. It's perfectly fine. Like if I take, let's say I go just 5-man through there, what does that give me? 3 outfielders, a first baseman, and a third baseman, and I'm cashing out for $45.60 a piece for my 5-man. Totally fine. So Cody Bellinger, he could be lower priced, and that would obviously bring us to a lower average. But with just considering the average cost of that stack, it does not matter that he's priced there. On FanDuel, 2,900 outfield and first base eligible. Totally happy with those prices. Ian Happ, 42.29 across sites. We did see him in the leadoff spot the other day, so they might do that again. We'll see what happens. Love him in the leadoff spot. Like him quite a bit in the 6th spot, just as much. 16 home runs on the season, a 199 ISO, creating runs 17% better than average. Mashes the ball when he makes contact. Very good season out of Ian Happ, and he is not priced for what his performance has been. And this isn't like an outlier. I mean, he doesn't hit for a lot of average, but that doesn't really matter. it's not like these numbers are outliers for Ian Happ. He's been a good player over time, so the prices are just low. Dansby appropriately low priced at this point. 9 home runs, 7 steals, a 126 ISO, 20 points below average for run creation. Still hitting the ball very hard. I'm going to continue to focus on that because that's really all we're getting out of him at this point. But formerly a very high-end shortstop who I like a lot and could find upside. Right-handed bat in this ballpark against this pitcher. David Bote and Miguel Amaya, if that's who's at the bottom of the lineup, they're mix and match pieces. Bote's all right. Amaya not so much. What's up, Trav? Travis Wyndham's here. Powers here. Oh, the lineup dropped, so it is Happ in the leadoff spot. All right, Happ, Paredes, Suzuki, Bellinger. Let me see if I got it. Astros is out as well. All right, so let me... I'll just drop it back in real quick because some of those numbers will retabulate for like Ian Happ moving to the leadoff spot. Oops. Got to actually fix it. All right. Where's Twitter? There it is. Does it just happen, Nico, that are switching places? That would be easy. Nope. All right. This is all over the place. Shit. I should just type it. So not worth trying to do it this way. But at a Suzuki, Bellinger, Wisdom. So Cody moves up. And I accidentally deleted Wisdom anyway. And then this is Nico. Dansby, Christian Bethancourt. And... all right, a little bit different. So very far down the board, Christian Bethancourt in that spot. Every now and again, he can go yard, give you a decent little surprise catcher performance, but we're talking about a guy over 92 plate appearances is way sub Mendoza, a 211 on base percentage, and a 38 WRC plus with just 2 home runs. Last year, 11 home runs and 332 chances, a 156 ISO. The year before, 11 home runs and 333 chances with a 157 ISO. Very consistent over those 2 seasons for giving you almost exactly those same numbers. So there's a little tiny sliver of power upside for 2,100, 2,200 across sites, but he is a very low priority bat in this lineup. Pete Crow Armstrong is really just here playing defense and stealing bases occasionally. He does have speed. He's a very good defensive player. Right now, he's slashing 188, 235, 304, and he's 50% worse than average for run creation. So that's not great. I do absolutely love Ian Happ moving to the leadoff spot, 8.73 in the home run model. He gets on base at a very good clip. Very good table setter for the rest of this lineup. Paredes in the 2 spot has a ton of power. Suzuki, Bellinger. I really like this configuration of this lineup from 1 through 5 there. It's the same 5 guys that I highlighted, but now you get them in a different order and starting from the top instead of starting from 2 and working down to 6. Absolutely love that version of the Cubs lineup and will consider it for some upside. Probably going to be a little bit lower owned than they should be in this ballpark against Lodolo and with a 4.38 implied total. On the red side, definitely very interesting. The highest run total on the board. And I guess the game stack in this one, not out of consideration. You just would be very threatened by rain in that case. But starting off for the Reds, Jonathan India holding down the leadoff spot since he's moved back up there. 368 on base percentage, creating runs 16% better than average. He's been very good this season for them. Back to the Jonathan India of old, who was a pretty solid contributor. He's hit 8 home runs and stolen 10 bases. He's not great for counting stats, but every now and then he can provide them. He doesn't. He's not one of these like Nico style guys where it's just light contact. Gives you a little bit more in terms of barrels, 7.4%. That's not great, but it's not terrible. It's not 1.5%, 36.5% hard hits. So India could give you a little bit of bonus in terms of the counting stats if you go there. Absolutely a perfectly fine way to start off a red stack with him at second base for a fair price. Ellie, superstar caliber player, especially when we're talking DFS. 18 home runs, 55 stolen bases, getting on base at a 350 clip, so I do not care about the strikeouts. And he's wrangled the strikeouts a little bit. 30.9 is still very high, but it's lower than 33.7. He's also drawing more walks this year. He's crushing the ball when he makes contact, 12.4% barrels, 44% hard hits, 224 ISO, and a 129 WRC+. He's not even fully baked yet. I think there's more growth to come. and he's just putting up absolute monster numbers. Spencer Steer, 5,000, 3,500. An effective bat. I like the second base eligibility, 3,500 on the FanDuel slate. First and outfield is perfectly fine for him on DraftKings. 15 homers, 17 steals. Mediocre in terms of the slash line. The on base is okay. The 193 ISO could be a little bit higher for the price that he's at on both sites, but 193 is perfectly fine. Creating runs 7% better than average. A key bat in red stacks. TJ Friedel is cheap, 4,000, 2,900, especially if he's going to hit cleanup. 5 home runs in 129 plate appearances with 6 stolen bases. Last year, he hit 18 home runs across 556, stole 27 bases. He doesn't make elite contact. Those homers last year came on pretty light contact. Same thing the year before. So we'll see what we get power-wise as the rest of the season unfolds. It's a pretty good pace so far, though. 5 home runs and 129 chances on similar kind of contact. Definitely has speed if he's involved in getting on base. Again, for a cleanup bat, for 4,000 in the outfield, 2,900 on FanDuel, perfectly happy to have shares of TJ Friedel, and you hope he goes a little bit lower owned than he should, but he's probably going to be popular in that spot in the lineup. Tyler Stevenson, I made him the Reds team home run pick of the day. Just like doing interesting things on short slates like this instead of picking the most obvious guys. Obviously, Elliott 9.04 would have been the clear pick, but Stevenson 609 in the home run model. He's got 11 on the season, a solid 181 ISO for a catcher, not bad. 9.3% barrels and 44.7% hard hits, and he's maintained that contact from year over year. He's low strikeout, so he doesn't crush the ball, but he hits the ball very hard when he puts it in play, and he puts it in play pretty frequently. He can also draw a walk, get on base. 103 WRC plus, pretty solid. Jamer Candelario with all his pops, 4,600, 3,000 at third base and first base on FanDuel. First base only on DraftKings. 17 homers on the season, a 210 ISO. The numbers in terms of the front end of the triple slash have started to come back down a little bit. He scuffled through the first part of the season, really caught fire, hit a bunch of home runs, was hitting for a little bit better average on base. Now we're back to normal, where we're just kind of hunting for home runs. But if he's going to be cheap and if he's going to be any kind of lower owned for a little bit of scuffles, definitely happy to invest at a very good price. Jake Fraley, just some on base and stolen base skills, 14 steals and 325 on base, but just a 91 WRC plus. For that kind of player, that needs to be a better on base or a little bit more productive for run creation. He's a mix and match guy in your outfield, but I prefer Will Benson at the bottom of the lineup with all his power and counting stat upside. Santiago Espinal in between them is a mix and match infielder at best. He has hit 7 odd home runs this year, 6 stolen bases, but just a 73 WRC plus. Again, just give me Will Benson, 3,300 on DraftKings, 27 on FanDuel. I don't care that he's slashing 194, 277, 394 for DFS for a cheap price, knowing that I'm getting a guy who is an inconsistent bat. 12 home runs, 13 steals, and 315 plate appearances, a 201 ISO. I'll buy the ceiling, and he'll be less popular than most of the other Reds. So it's a way to get different while staying cheap at the bottom of the Reds lineup. You can see the premium contact the last 2 years has been great. His output last season was terrific. 11 homers, 19 steals, and 329 chances while slashing 275, 365, 498. So I know there's more upside there, too. The things that we're worried about current season, and the things I said I don't really care about, the things that some would worry about current season, he was much better at last year. So I do know there's a better hitter in there, in addition to having all the upside for counting stats that he's maintained. It's got to go Reds bats, Cubs bats, Lodolo, and no Hendricks for me. If we're ranking them out, I do think all 3 sides, including Lodolo, are playable. I just prefer the bats, and it's, again, the highest run total on the board. So I lean bats over Lodolo. Astros lineup came in. Looks pretty normal to me. Pirates doesn't look like we've got that one just yet. Nope. So, Framber Valdez, one of the top pitchers on the board, 8,900, great price on DraftKings, 9,500 on FanDuel. Other than the strikeout stuff being diminished and, hitting a few walls along the way this season, he really hasn't been bad at all. He had one rough start where he gave up 8 earned runs, and then a couple uncharacteristic starts where he gave up 5 earned runs. But I mean, if we're going to write off a pitcher who's been as good as he's been over the last couple of seasons, over 3 shaky starts, that's not how I like to handle it. I'm just happy that he's cheap. 8,900 is way too far diminished on DraftKings. 95 on FanDuel against the Pirates. This should be probably a 99 10K, 98 10K kind of a spot. 21.7% strikeouts on the season, but he struck out 10 in 2 of his last 3 games. One was against Miami. The other was against the Dodgers. It's a pretty high-end game. 6 1/3, 4 hits, no runs, 2 walks, 10 Ks. Faced 25 Dodgers. In between, he gave up 2 earned runs over 5 2/3 to the Mariners. He struck out 6, but he was inefficient. He walked 4 in that game. Walks are always not an issue, but are a factor for him in terms of how efficiently he pitches. The game against Miami, he went 7, gave up 1 earned on 6 hits, struck out 10, walked 1. A couple of 3 earned run games. Typically pitches deep into ball games. Manages home runs in an excellent way. 1.99% home run rate this year. Doing that with a 4.5% barrel rate and 0.7 degrees of average launch. Last year it was 4.2 degrees. The year before it was negative 3.6. Year before that it was negative 5 something. He is very, 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 very good at keeping the ball on the ground and in the ballpark. Against a team like the Pirates that, they got Brian De La Cruz because he hits some home runs. He's got 18 on the season. They've got O'Neill Cruz who hits home runs, 17 on the season. Brian Reynolds with 18 home runs on the year tied now, I guess, for the team lead. What they don't do is sequence and get on base all that effectively. This projected version of the Pirates lineup has an average on base percentage of .309. There are some okay run creators. There are some okay bats. But if you're going to take the home run upside away from this team, when they've had their days, it's been by and large on power. Love the upside for Fromber. Think he can absolutely go there enthusiastically on both sites. He's even better on DraftKings at that 8,900. He should be absurdly popular over there. Let's see where he's at. Take a look where our friends over at RG have him projected for ownership. Most popular on the FanDuel slate, that makes sense. And on the DraftKings, I expect the same thing's going to be true because he's cheaper relative to the cap over there. It's Dylan Cease. All right. That actually makes sense, too. He's in a lot of lineups. Between Cease, Fromber, and Webb, who, clearly top 3 pitchers on the board, that is the bulk of your DraftKings pitching ownership projections. And then the next most obvious 2 guys slot in. Looking at that, though, if they're correct here, it does make me a little bit more interested in Lodolo. Just because they've got him at like a quarter of the ownership, or not even. That does make Lodolo more interesting. It's still a very dangerous, threatening spot. It's a tournament play for sure. There's no safety in it. But if he's going to come in at a quarter of the ownership of some of these guys and even less than that to some of the top 2, I'm kind of more interested. It is in a differentiated angle on just a 5-game slate. So if you just went like Lodolo, Kershaw, it wouldn't be crazy. I think you get enough upside out of Kershaw over 75, 80 pitches. I don't like any of the other guys below that, but you could go Lodolo and then the most popular value pitcher, which is Davis Daniel, and just combine that, and you're definitely on a different path than most. It's not bad. You're paying 92, so you're paying more for him than Valdez or Webb. But that makes me definitely more interested in in Lodolo from that first game. Still do prefer in a ownership vacuum. I still do prefer Fromber, Cease, and Webb, all 3 of those guys. But that ownership definitely makes it catch up in terms of where he's projected, where he's priced, and all of that. So insert Lodolo a little bit more enthusiastically back into that pitching mix, given that he's going to be a quarter of the ownership of all the other guys on DK. On FanDuel, I think it matters less. That's where I play for anybody new. So where you're looking at one pitcher, it just, I'm sure he is the 4th most highly owned between those guys. 3rd most, okay. Oh, weird. They don't have Dylan Cease on here. Where the fuck is Cease? Huh. Is that something that I did? Let me see. That's really weird. Oh, strange. He's in there with a 0. Why is he projected for 0? There we go. All right. Yeah, so Cease is going to be your... I hate how this thing works. I'm doing this in the optimizer, not just like on their projections page. I actually never visit their website outside of checking Roth. Yeah, so Cease will be the most highly owned. And Lodolo definitely on FanDuel as well falls into like single-digit ownership. And it is roughly, again, a quarter of what those other guys are owned. So given that it's a 5-game slate, that is a big, big differentiator now that I'm thinking about it correctly. I didn't think the ownership would be quite so stark. I'm curious where other sites have those 4 guys ranked. If you guys have eyes on ownership, you don't have to give the numbers. Please don't. That's why I don't give RG's numbers away. But I'd love to hear what order and like how big a difference they have Cease, Valdez, Webb, and Lodolo. Because Lodolo is dramatically offset on RGs. I hadn't spotted that. I think it makes sense that he would be the lowest owned out of those 4 pitchers. But being a quarter of the ownership on both sides of those other guys, that feels a little strong. Anyway, Fromber, believably spectacular in this spot. And regardless of ownership, I would definitely be interested in having some if I can afford it. Jake Woodford is a pretty firm no over 2 starts, 8 1/3 innings, a 15.2% strikeout rate, a 10.8 ERA, 6.16 xFIP, which is 4 and change runs better than the ERA is, but obviously not at all appealing. To be fair to Mr. Woodford here, we have seen him in the show in a couple spots in the past, going back through 2020, but it's always been limited. 26 appearances and 8 starts, 67 and 2/3 innings back in 2021. He had a 3.99 ERA, but a 5.06 xFIP with a 17.1% strikeout rate. In a small sample in 22, he had a 12.8% strikeout rate. In 2023, he had a 13.1% strikeout rate. In his various stops in the minor leagues, 2022 in AAA, 43 innings, 10 starts. He had a 21.3% strikeout rate. That's basically the high. 8 innings in AA, I'm not going to count. He technically spiked to 36.7, but I'm not going to count that. Pretty bad pitcher. Pretty targetable with Astros bats. They're elite, at least at the top end, and some interesting bats down lineup. I never really mind digging into the shares of Jake Myers, Chas McCormick down lineup with this team. I think Jeremy Pena, Jainer Diaz are pretty effective from the heart of the lineup. So definitely some appeal for the Astros. They're probably going to be pretty popular going up against Woodford with the second highest total on the board. Looking at the Pirates, don't love stacking against Fromber. If nothing else, you can see what he does in the home run model. For people who are new, this is our home run numbers. You're looking for 10 as the magic number. 10 plus means like you've got a really good shot at hitting a home run or like, an above average chance. Anything below that is obviously diminishing returns. Only Brian Reynolds above even halfway to that point on this in this projected version of the Pirates lineup. If Brian De La Cruz is in the starting lineup today, they just acquired him at the deadline. $3,600 is a great price for him, but he's only available on DraftKings, so it further hampers the stack on the FanDuel slate if he's just in the lineup but not available. McCutcheon off the top, 4,200, 2,800 in the outfield. We've talked about him a few times. Getting on base, but not at the elite clip that he used to. Creating runs, but only 1% better than average. Pretty weak slash line. Mediocre overall. 12.1% barrels has kept him afloat. He has hit 13 home runs. He's a mix and match quality outfielder at this point. Reynolds is a legit star caliber player. 287, 354, 481, a 193 ISO. Creating runs 32% better than average. 18 homers, 6 steals. Reynolds is very, very good. It's just not a great spot for run creation, and if nobody around him is going to help with sequencing, there's only so much that he can do on his own. So as an individual play, maybe a home run hunt, but it's against one of the worst home run matchups in all of baseball. O'Neal Cruz, hampered by the home run downside. Brian De La Cruz, if he's in the lineup again, very, very cheap at $3,600, and he has hit 18 home runs. Just a 172 ISO, a 96 WRC+. Mediocre performance, but there is power in that bat for sure. 11% barrels and 43% hard hits. But you're not really homer hunting with him. You're not really homer hunting with O'Neal. Connor Joe, for whatever it's worth, just a 2.47 in the home run model. He's got 7 on the year in 332 chances, just a 139 ISO. Everybody below him in the lineup, weak options outside of maybe Joey Bart, who has flashed some power on a short sample this year. 136 plate appearances. Joey Bart's hit 6 home runs. He's got a 195 ISO, 11.1% barrels, 42% hard hits. But again, it's just a really, really bad spot. Even if you're looking at it as like a 3-man differentiator for ownership, it's really struggled to see the Pirates putting a big total on Framber today. Guys that I didn't specifically talk about, Brian Hayes, I really liked the bat and the potential coming into this year, and he has not delivered. 67 WRC plus, just 3 homers, 10 steals, and 339 chances in a really weak slash line. Not making the legitimate contact that he made last year that had me so interested. So pretty much off that bandwagon at this point. Jared Triolo not delivering the on-base skills that he had in previous seasons, so we're not interested there. And then Michael A. not giving us that weird counting stat upside that he's had in previous seasons, really. 2,325. Very cheap if you just want to cling to those memories, but 4 home runs, 9 steals, a 62 WRC+. plus. Not a great season out of him. Jose Altuve, 5,400, 3,700. Couple bucks cheap, honestly. For a future Hall of Famer having a very strong season, who's slashing 309, 357, 456, 14 home runs, 15 stolen bases at a key position like second base where options are very limited and even further limited by this very, very short slate that we're dealing with. Altuve is a rock star option on this slate against this pitcher. 147 ISO is not a great ISO, but he's managed to stay extremely relevant despite that little dip. When was his ISO last year? 211 last year, 233 the year before. So we know there is more power in terms of extra base hits, and I don't think he's all that off the pace. He hit 17 home runs last year with that better ISO. Hit 28 the year before. We're probably not approaching that number, but I think we're going to clear the 17 from last year. Jose Altuve is an absolute superstar. Alex Bregman for just 44.34. DraftKings has not caught up to the resurgence. FanDuel has. 14 home runs, 251, 312, 412. Still a long way to go to get to like a great season, but he's going to end up, as long as the output over the last month and change continues, it's going to end up with a pretty decent season. 161 ISO, he's up to 105 WRC+. plus. These numbers will bounce back and forth with day-to-day performance over the next few weeks, but definitely seems to have righted the ship. He's been very low strikeout all season, characteristically low strikeout. He's been down in walks. That's hurting the on base, which is hurting the WRC plus a little bit. That's easy enough for a hitter like him to pick back up. So I definitely think we could see more and more upside out of Alex Bregman. He's an absolute priority at 4,400 on DraftKings and very much in play in this stack on FanDuel. Jordan Alvarez, their best overall player, 13.9% barrels, 46.8% hard hits, 20 home runs, 234 ISO. We're diminished slightly year over year, but we're still dealing with very, very good numbers in a vacuum. It's just a little bit under where his previous performance has been. If you like to buy a guy just in terms of like he'll be the best player in baseball over the last 2 months of the season, I would be totally comfortable saying that could be Jordan Alvarez. He is not off the mark in terms of the performance. 3,000 continues to be very good pricing for Jainer Diaz, who hits cleanup basically every day in this lineup on the site where you actually need to play catchers. That's just a bargain. 8.1% barrels, 45% hard hits, 10 home runs on the season. His creator runs 11% better than average. He's a very, very effective catcher bat. 14.5% strikeouts and just 3.8% walks. He is constantly putting the ball in play. That's all you really want to buy for a position that you have to fill over here. That's a great option. 3,000 on FanDuel. As I've said many times, you can just consider him this team's first baseman on the FanDuel slate. That said, John Singleton a couple spots later, if you're going to pick off a John Singleton home run, you've got worse spots all season than facing Jake Woodford here. The big lefty does have a little bit of power in that bat. Woodford's given up a 4.35% home run rate on just egregiously bad premium contact. This is just a 2-game sample. Last year it was 4.95 in a bigger sample. If you want that on a higher barrel rate, higher hard hit rate, tragic exit velo numbers. Year before it was 48 and a third innings, almost exclusively in relief, and he wasn't bad for giving up home runs at all in that year. But the last 2 seasons, or at least last season and a tiny sample this year, super gettable for power. So John Singleton, I like him a little bit more than I normally would. But if I'm making the decision for one lineup, I'm probably trying to get Jainer Diaz in there, and I just look at Singleton as a price savings if I need it. In between those two, Jeremy Pena for 42, 3,000. Again, as I said yesterday and a few times, just slots in as like a very playable shortstop. It's a diminishment from your Bobby Witts, your Francisco Lindors, your superstar caliber shortstops, your Ellie De La Cruzes, to mention a guy who's on this slate. But it's a softer drop than a lot of other lower end shortstops. So happy to have Jeremy Pena. He's very fairly priced for a guy who's got a decent slash line this year. He's created runs 2% better than average. A little bit of counting stat upside, 9 home runs, 12 steals. He's no superstar. He's not even a star, but he doesn't really strike out. He doesn't draw that many walks. So again, it's another guy who's just putting the ball in play. And with some very effective on-base options ahead of him, the table's constantly set for him to deliver. He's been a good player this year. Jake Myers, 11 home runs on the season, a 170 ISO, dead at league average creating runs, mix and match caliber outfielder. Victor Caratini, again, we've talked about him a few times this season. Whenever he's in the lineup, he's not uninteresting. Switch hitter with a little bit of pop in the bat. 7.9% barrels, 44.6% hard hits this year. And you can see those numbers are consistent with what he's done for premium contact the last few seasons. 128 plate appearances. He's hit 5 home runs, a very solid 276, 320, 466 hitter, 190 ISO with a 118 WRC plus. From a catcher who costs $3,000, $2,400 on FanDuel that nobody is going to be playing, there's a lot of upside there if you need to discount a Astros stack a little bit, because you do have 3 expensive bats, or on DraftKings 2 expensive bats at the top of the lineup. Caratini last year in 226 plate appearances, very similar output, 7 home runs, pretty solid little triple slash. Year before he was sub Mendoza, but he did hit 9 home runs and 314 chances in a larger sample. So there's believable power upside there again from a player that just nobody's considering. 14.1% strikeouts and 4.7% walks this season as well. So again, a lot of balls in play. And then there's Chas McCormick, who had his very solid breakout year that we were forecasting for a long time. Had that last year. He's slowly, looks like these numbers are climbing. I haven't looked at his recent game logs, but 215, 277, 322, 4 homers, 7 steals. I think we've gotten a little bit of output from him over the last couple of games. Just an uncharacteristically bad season out of McCormick, but a good player and another guy who just, terrible spot in the lineup, obviously. But if he goes under owned compared to everybody else in this lineup, I will welcome Chas McCormick into my stacks with open arms. Let's see. It's not been since the start of July. Let's see what is there any kind of... There we go. 9. Give him a 10th one. Last 10 games for McCormick. Extremely small sample, obviously, but 280, 357, 400. Hit a home run. 4 runs, 2 ribbies. Striking out at a 28.6% clip, drawing walks 7.1% of the time, just a 120 ISO in that tiny sample. So most of those were singles, but he does have the 1 home run. Actually, all of those outside of the home run are singles. But it's a little bit more effective of a stretch. Hopefully it's him finally finding his footing. He's only made 195 plate appearances, been hurt, been out of the lineup a little bit. But again, just happy to have the guy with a very solid barrel rate over the last 2 years, with an okay barrel rate this year and a lot of potential from the bottom of the lineup that for both power and speed that nobody's really going to go to. Last year, 22 homers, 19 steals in 457 chances. Year before, 14 home runs in 407 chances that nobody was really rostering. Framber Valdez, Astros bats. Really nothing from the Pirates outside of you could maybe put together some short stacks as like low-owned dart throws. But it's a really bad spot against Framber. This is not a pitcher that typically gets blown up, and he's not a pitcher that typically contributes to DFS scoring. Mama says, going back to that question about the ownership, 54, 41, 15. That's a little bit higher on Lodolo. But it doesn't really change that opinion. That it doesn't really change my change of opinion from originally saying like I don't really love Lodolo to discovering how low owned he was. That is a higher ownership projection for him, but those other 2 guys are also higher relative to that other site, so it all just kind of balances out. So yeah, considering he's going to be under owned compared to those other guys, I do think it contributes to his value, and it at least balances him out with those other guys. He's just facing the danger of that ballpark, a decent enough opposing team with a monster Vegas total. So it's not a great spot on paper that way, but when we factor in the DFS part of it, the ownership part of it, it does definitely become more interesting. Yeah, going back a little bit. Sorry, Bro Barry, and I haven't kept up with your question. I know you're new in our chat, and I should have done a better job keeping an eye on the questions. But when there's just one of me, I tend to zero in on what I'm talking about and then just hop back to chat. But it looks like everybody was able to answer your question. Power gave you a good answer there. The relative exit velocity and the launch angle equals a barrel. I forget what the exact equation is, but it's just it is a measure exactly what you said. You had it pretty well pegged there as far as it's a measure of the quality of contact that hitter's making, and specifically barrels equal extra base hits and home runs. Sounds like Trey finally added me on the PlayStation Network. I look forward to your invites. I'm, not to toot my own horn, very good at pitching in the show, and I am not at all good at hitting. I think that's pretty true for everybody, though. What level do you pitch on? Do you use the relative sliders that adjust for you? I pitch on Legend Plus. Good at pitching, and I can't hit for shit. I bounce between Rookie Plus and Veteran for hitting. So if we play Trey, you'll probably strike me out like 14 times. I might come up with one home run, but I'm looking forward to no hitting you. Clay Kershaw on the mound for the Dodgers. Dylan Cease on the mound for the Padres. Speaking of no hitters, Cease just a tremendous season. 3.50 ERA with a 3.13 xFIP underneath it, so he's pitching even better under the covers than that 3.50 ERA would say. A 14.5% swinging strike rate is dominant, nearly a 30% CSW, 32.5% strikeout rate overall. He's been absolutely fantastic. Gives up a little bit from time to time in terms of premium contact. 10.4% barrel rate against on a fly ball trajectory at 15.3 degrees can equal some home run output, but he's very good at inducing weak to medium contact, 36.2% hard hits within that, 88.7 miles an hour average exit velo. So it's more reflective of just making some well-struck mistakes than anything else. And by and large, they haven't traveled out of the ballpark. Just a 2.9% home run rate. That could easily be higher with those kind of power numbers on the front end of that. So Cease, tremendous upside. Obviously, facing Shohei Ohtani, Will Smith, and Teoscar Hernandez is a little bit of a challenge at the top of the board. But if anybody can handle that challenge, Cease is at least on the list of guys. Let me pull up Gavin Lux, since we didn't actually end up taking a look at it yesterday, just in anticipation of getting to that side. So at 11,000, Cease is obviously extremely expensive on the FanDuel slate, but he's well worth getting to. He's got the best strikeout upside, even against typically the Dodgers we're saying is a relatively low strikeout opponent, and they've got a couple low strikeout guys, but this version of the Dodgers lineup, 23.3% strikeout rate, is actually a worse than average strikeout rate. So it's an extremely targetable version of the Dodgers. Doesn't look like we've got the confirmed in just yet. We do have the pods. We pop that in here. On the other side, the only thing that's going to limit Clay Kershaw outside, well, two things. The 75 to 80 pitch count that we're expecting, I don't think he creeps up 85, 90. I think we're looking at 75, 80, get him probably through a fifth. He does have upside. He is more than capable of finding his own strikeouts, even against the Padres. But the secondary factor that will potentially limit his outing here is the 16.1% strikeout rate that this confirmed Padres lineup has. If nothing else, this is a team that is very, very good at avoiding strikeouts. You can see only one guy in this lineup, and it's Manny Machado, of all people, above a 20% strikeout rate. Manny was at 18-1 last year. So, I mean, there's a lot of talent here. You could say that Bryce Johnson, obviously only 46 plate appearances at 19.6, may be unrealistic given the 31% last year. So maybe that's a tick higher in the realistic number. But it's a very, very low strikeout squad. So those combined factors, I think the short outing is baked into the price, 8,200, 8,300. You just have to rely on Kershaw being Kershaw and finding the strikeouts against this team. Last time out again, faced San Francisco, just 4 innings, faced 20 hitters, struck out 6, walked 2, 6 hits, 2 earned runs. An inefficient start. Again, if he didn't give up the 6 hits through there, I think that equals a 5th inning with facing 20 hitters. So I think we're okay for 5. 83 on FanDuel. You could probably go there, upside to 30-ish points. You would need the other pitchers to kind of fail around that, but you do have purchasing power cooked in as well. Like if we look at the overall FanDuel board again, just getting him here with compared to, you're saving nearly 1,000 from all those guys and significant from the guy on the other side of this game. even without the quality start, it's realistic to think that Lodolo could go bust there. A little bit more difficult to believe that either one of these guys goes completely tits up, but they might not have elite starts. Both of them have had games this season where they've been more limited for strikeouts, for example. And then you're just worried about Cease, but I think you make enough of that up, even if Cease does have the good game against the Dodgers. I think you could make enough of that up by that price savings. That's a pretty dramatic price savings. Same is true on DraftKings. It's just, lower number for Dylan Cease, so it's not quite as dramatic a savings. But it's definitely there. And on DK, you don't need to worry about the quality start. Just get me through 5, take a shot at the win. Obviously, if the Dodgers are going to get him the win here, that damages Cease's upside on the other side. So when you consider the heads-up factor there, if you're just chasing the Kershaw play, you're believing that Cease is going to kind of at least be a little bit limited for giving up some runs here. So I do think Kershaw is on the board, despite the potentially limited pitch count. And we know that Clay Kershaw has been one of the best pitchers of his generation. If you have not paid attention to baseball over the last 15 years or so, absolutely elite pitcher, just on the back end of the career at this point, and has been extremely injury prone, very, very fragile. So that's why I do think they're going to manage the pitch count. Let's see if we got the Dodgers lineup in the last couple minutes while I've been rambling. Olsen and Darno go back-to-back for the second time today. They've gone back-to-back twice today. Pretty big output from those two on the Braves. Nice to see Olsen with a decent day. No Dodgers lineup. Rockies is in. We'll talk about them in just a minute. So, the greatly diminished Dodgers, Shohei, Will Smith at the top, a superstar of all superstars at the top of the board, obviously having a monster year, 32 homers, 28 steals, 184 WRC+, plus a 321 ISO, and the presumptive NL MVP. Will Smith is a tremendous, tremendous catcher. At 5,800, he is very expensive relative to probably every other catcher on this slate on DraftKings. At 3,100, he's downright cheap for his talent. I don't care what position he plays on FanDuel. 15 home runs, a 199 ISO, a 121 WRC+. Plus. He's hitting second for the Dodgers behind Shohei Ohtani, who's constantly on base at a 402 on-base percentage. If he's not clearing the bases ahead of Will Smith, that's a great option on FanDuel. He's a little bit more difficult to play where you actually have to play catchers, honestly. Gavin Lux at 3,200. I promised to talk about the recent game log. Let's take a look. Let's give him the last, we'll cut it to like here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Whoops. Why am I not getting my totals now? Come on. There we go. All right. Over the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 11. I don't want the 11th game in there. It won't give me the totals for the 10. There we go. Over the last 10 games, Gavin Lux, again, and this is just, teeny tiny sample, completely meaningless, but it's nice to see a player who does have skills actually produce something. Over the last 10 games, and you can go back maybe a little bit further, but it probably diminishes the number somewhat and makes it more realistic, honestly. But over the last 10, 483, 543, 931. Creating runs 197% better than average. 448 ISO, 3 home runs, 7 runs, 9 ribbies, a stolen base. He's been pretty tremendous. If we take it back to the beginning of July, it's still good output. Back to the beginning of July, we're at 297, 378, 547. So like I said, much more realistic numbers. A 250 ISO, 4 homers. Most of that output has come in that last 10 games, though. A 159 WRC plus for the month of July. So Lux is at least finally bounced back to the player that he's kind of supposed to be. For the season, we're at 238, 295, 355 after missing all of last season. It's been a rough year, but 6 home runs now, 4 stolen bases, again, most of which came in the last month or so. 86 WRC plus, but potentially capable for a very cheap price of holding down that 3 spot right now. Teoscar Hernandez for 3,400 has 22 home runs on the year at 216 ISO, your home run derby winner. Tons and tons of power, and a guy who could potentially exploit that barrel rate and find a home run against even a pitcher as good as Cease, but 27.9% strikeouts this year, 31-1 last year. Definitely some upside for K's against him for Dylan Cease. Back end of the lineup, really difficult to trust at this point. Pretty weak. You can see nobody above average for run creation, and several guys in that back end really low end for run creation, having some really rough seasons. Jason Hayward, probably the most playable in that group, and Andy Pajes is a reasonable alternative. Both of those guys do have power. Hayward the lefty, Andy Pajes the righty. Both guys making decent premium contact. Hayward's barrels are down, but the hard hits are there. It's the opposite for Andy Pajes. He's become more and more difficult to trust. Most of the quality in this line came in his first several, 100 plate appearances or so. 355 now. We're at 244, 299, 377 in just a 92 WRC plus, and he's been stuck between like 6 and 8 home runs for the last 2 months or so. But between all these guys, he does have right-handed upside at the plate, a little bit of power. Kevin Biggio, Enrique Hernandez, Nick Ahmed, all are just skippable or at best mix and match parts at the bottom of the lineup. Not one of those guys has been at all reliable over the past few seasons. Enrique Hernandez is having like the worst year of his career and has been greatly diminished from his quality utility player role over the last few seasons. So don't love the bottom of the Dodgers. Think it feeds the upside for Dylan Cease. And then on the Padres side, for the innings where they're going to be facing Clay Kershaw, I have no desire to draw Padres stacks. I think the only thing maybe that they do is a couple of base hits, maybe some sequencing and find a run. Kershaw's really high end, so it's not a great spot for pods. But if you're going there, Luis Arraez at the top is very, very cheap at second base on FanDuel. 4,200 at first base is not ideal positioning for him, but he's a very high-quality player in terms of getting on base. He could give you 3-4 base hits, a couple of runs through correlated scoring. You're typically not getting home run or stolen base output out of him, not getting individual output out of him outside of base hits. He needs help from his friends, and that's where he runs into trouble. Jurickson Profar for 47.36, inappropriately priced on DraftKings for the output that we've gotten this season. They're still kind of leaning into who he's been over the course of the last 10 or so seasons. 3,600 on FanDuel reflects the high-quality season that he's had this year, and as I said last night, he could have a pretty bad last 2 months and still come away with a decent season at this point. So kudos to him. Mix and match caliber play in my mind against Clayton Kershaw. Xander Bogaerts I'm interested in, 4,000, 3,000. I'm not leaving him or Manny Machado out of a Padres stack. They're the top 2 priority bats here. Bogey up to 271, 311, 381. Dead at league average for run creation, 5 homers, 5 steals. Low strikeout, low walk, a lot of balls in play. Needs to continue picking things up, but he missed a large chunk of the season. Let's hope he has a solid last 2 months. Very capable of doing so. Machado for just 49.31 based on the track record is very cheap. Mediocre season out of him, 265, 317, 432. He is creating runs at a very good clip at 112, 12% better than average. But just 16 home runs, 5 steals, just a 167 ISO. We're off a little bit. Premium contact hasn't been bad, though. 9.6% barrels down from 10.5 last year, 48.5% hard hits, up from 45.9% last year. Manny Machado is still lurking in there somewhere. Donovan Solano, a very good line drive hitter, 303, 359, 406, 123 WRC plus, can absolutely be in my lineup. Pretty good table setter with a 359 on base over his 192 chances this year. It's not a large sample, but it's not a crushingly small sample either. I would honestly consider switching these two. I think Solano is more effective in the 2 spot and keep Profar down here in the 5, but it's their lineup. They can do what they want with it. Jackson Merrill having a good rookie season, 13 homers, 11 steals, a 117 WRC plus. Ha-Sung Kim providing counting stats, 10 homers, 20 steals, a 102 WRC plus. The triple slash is limited, but it's improving on the average on the front end. The on base is okay, but definitely could be better. Luis Campusano is a mix and match quality catcher, and then Bryce Johnson in the outfield at 2,100, 2,200 is pretty low end over 46 plate appearances this year. 48 plate appearances last year wasn't much better. 19 plate appearances the year before wasn't much better than that. That's still not a lot of plate appearances. It's around 100 just doing the rough math, 120 doing the rough math, and he's been sub Mendoza across the entire thing. I'm going to call that probably a sub 200 on base, or maybe floating around 200 on base if we average those out. It's a pretty bad player. Dylan Cease way up top. Clay Kershaw in a short start at those prices, I think, is on the board. I'll put him second. Padres bats above the Dodgers bats. All 4 corners loosely playable, but I really, out of everything, I really don't want the Dodgers all that much. I like the Cease side. Roth lowered the weather risk in Cincinnati. Good. Good to hear. that I agree with that, Mamba. I think you could say you could make a very strong argument for an undercut to that ownership on Cease. 54 point something percent ownership on DK. But you're very short on options for one thing, so that number's not like completely wild. And the idea that he can't have a ceiling game against this Dodgers lineup is just incorrect, buddy. This is not the Dodgers that we started the season with. There's no Mookie Betts. There's no Freddie Freeman. There's no Max Muncy. They're down a lot of their quality bats. So against this version of the Dodgers, he could definitely have a ceiling game. Has he not faced the Dodgers somehow yet this year? That's weird. How has he not faced a division opponent by this point in the season? Huh. All right, well, let's see if we can find a comparable. How about the Cleveland Guardians? Very comparable team. They don't have an Ohtani, obviously, but they've got Jose Ramirez, who's, a couple steps down, but very, very good. They're comparable to the low strikeout version, the good version of the Dodgers that we had at the beginning of the year. Obviously, they don't have that caliber of superstar, but in terms of like the strikeout, what feeds the dominant upside start, the ceiling start. 2 starts ago, Dylan Cease struck out 10 Guardians, gave up 1 hit over 7 innings. That's not to mention, obviously, the 9 strikeout no-hitter that he threw in the last game. That was against the Nationals at Washington. They're also a fairly low strikeout squad. Just looking again for comparable options. There's not really that many. It's a lot of average teams through the game log. I think against this version of the Dodgers team, even the full version of the Dodgers team, I wouldn't question Dylan Cease's ceiling. I think if Mookie and all those guys were in this Dodgers lineup, Cease would not be as popular. I'll give you that. But the argument you should be making there, in my mind, Mamba, again, is not. Whoops, wrong one. Is that one. Not a complete undercut, not a shouldn't be rostered in your lineups, more a if he's at 54%, I'll take him at 35-40%, and I'll shave off a big chunk where I can gain leverage on, say, a Lodolo. You shave 15 points of ownership off of Cease, and you throw it to additional Lodolo shares, you're going to be at least twice, maybe 3 times the field on Lodolo, and there's your leverage. And you've still got a lot of Cease in case he does spike the upside game, but you're well under the field in case he doesn't. Right? It's not a no. It's just a maybe I want less than the field kind of situation. Speaking of no's, Kyle Freeland. I guess, again, on DraftKings, we do have to talk about it. 6,000 on that slate. He's got a 6.23 ERA, which is completely unappealing. A 4.34 xFIP is a little bit more encouraging. 52 innings in 10 starts this season, a 17.9% strikeout rate is not good at all. He went just 4 innings in the most recent start. He gave up 6 earned runs on 8 hits. He did, again, strike out 8 in that 4 innings against the Giants. He was kind of having an upside day in terms of the strikeouts, but obviously the runs and the hits caught up with him, and he was out of the game early. Going into that game, he had a run of 5 straight games where he went at least 6 innings, 3 of which he went into the 7th, 1 of which he completed the 7th. The game where he completed the 7th inning was against the Royals on July 5th. He struck out 5, walked 1, just 1 earned run on 7 hits. 3 earned runs on 7 hits 2 earned runs on 7 hits to the White Sox, 3 strikeouts in the game before that. Against Cincinnati, at Cincinnati, he had a pretty good day 3 starts ago. 6 2/3. He did give up 8 hits, but only 2 earned runs. Struck out 9, faced 27 hitters. Took the win, got the quality start. In every one of those starts outside of that most recent one, so that 5-start run, he booked the quality start in all of them. I hate to do this 2 times in a row, but there's a little bit of reason to think that Kyle Freeland is in play for your SP2 shares on DraftKings. 6,000 is a very low price. He's not going to be popular as compared to your Davis Daniels of the world. Your Hendricks, Stripling, and Woodford will probably be justifiably lower owned. But he's going to be less popular in terms of the value play. So if you're not going spendy in both spots, You have to consider Kyle Freeland on DraftKings. At 7,700 on FanDuel, I have a lot tougher of a time with it. I don't think he's as strongly on the board there. You're obviously taking a dramatically differentiated play in terms of price, in terms of ownership, but even Davis Daniel for 200 less is exceeding his upside on that slate on the other side. On DraftKings, Davis Daniel is 1,700 more than his opponent is, so that's a different kind of a conversation. I don't think Freeland's necessarily entirely off the board on FanDuel, just given that upside to book the quality start and maybe find a few Ks against the team that does have some strikeouts available for him. But again, the Angels are one of the higher implied totals on the board at 4.61. I just don't have a ton of faith in them, but I don't have a ton of faith in him. This is the spot to play him. This is questionable because you really do need, if you play that, even if he has an okay day, like his ceiling day, you need all of these guys to fail. You know? I don't know that we're getting that. Even if he's having a good day, he's driving his car nice and fast, like sometimes just the lanes in front of you in the race don't open up, or like no matter how hard you're whipping the horse, the lane in front of you doesn't open up and you're just boxed in against the rail and you can't get outside and go take the lead. I think Kyle Freeland would be boxed in even on a good day on FanDuel. On DraftKings, it's totally different. Daniel is definitely in play. He's just going to be popular on both sites as like the value guy du jour, and I really don't know how justified that is. Again, if that's going to be the case, I'm more compelled to draw some Rockies bats. Michael Talia, the home run pick of the day at 11.35 in the home run model. I think that ranked him third overall. We talked about him at length about his power output. We've been talking about him since he came up to the team 236 plate appearances ago, and we've gotten 18 home runs for our money, 291 ISO out of him. Not a consistent bat at all, but tons of power upside against a guy with a 20.3% strikeout rate over his 17 innings, 3 starts. A lot of the quality came from his first start of the year. He struck out 8 and went 8 innings against the Tigers in that one, gave up no runs and 4 hits. We were targeting Tigers bats in that one. We didn't know anything about Davis Daniel really outside of just looking at some minor league numbers. But second start against Oakland, 5 1/3. He gave up 4 earned runs, 5 runs on 7 hits, 3 strikeouts, but gave up 2 home runs. The most recent start faced Texas, 7 earned on 8 hits, struck out 3, gave up a home run. There's appeal in going to the Rockies if nobody else is, and taking a shot against a fairly highly owned value guy. And to me, rather than targeting the ownership that any of the good pitchers are going to have, we've established that those 3 guys are going to be super popular. Lodolo less so. Just target the ownership that's going to be on the bad pitcher in that group. He's going to be the next most popular guy after all 3 of these, and he's going to be paired with each of these 3 guys extensively. So just by virtue of doing that, you're targeting those guys anyway in those lineups. So I think there's good cause to at least consider some Rocky stacks. And they're showing decent numbers. They were the upper half of the stacked board anyway. The Angels bats with their implied run total obviously are on the board, and they're very, very low cost. I just think they're going to get a little bit popular for value play as well. So again, just feeds the upside to consider the other side of this one. If we're looking at it that way, let me finish with Davis Daniel. Hasn't really walked anybody in that stretch. The xFIP is good compared to the ERA, but Stuff Plus really doesn't like the makeup of his arsenal in a small sample. He's given up obviously some significant home runs. Found a few swinging strikes. Seems like a decent strike thrower, but not really putting hitters away yet at the major league level. So again, just mix and match type pitcher. For me, he's more of a target. If we're going to Rockies bats, let me see if we got the lineup in. We do. Looks roughly like this version. Charlie off the top, fairly priced for the current year output. A 333 on base is not bad, but it's not the elite level on base that he used to come up with. Premium contact is right around where it's been the last few seasons. Is a decent enough lefty bat against a weak righty. 7 home runs on the season, just 5 stolen bases, just a 155 ISO, 95 WRC plus. But if you're just looking for plate appearances from the left side to start things off with this stack, you could do worse than Charlie Blackmon in this spot. $4,000 is a very, very low price for Ezequiel Tovar at shortstop, especially on this slate where we haven't had an abundance of like super premium shortstops to worry about. That makes him interesting to me. 3,300 on FanDuel is a lot more correct against the FanDuel cap. 4,000 on DraftKings is very low. Dude slashing 290, 315, 493 this year. He's got a 203 ISO. He's created a run 7% better than average. He's hit 18 home runs. What more does a guy need to do to get priced appropriately? Brenton Doyle, 5,100, 3,200 is probably a little bit low on FanDuel, more correctly priced on DraftKings. He's been mashing the ball all season. 17 home runs, 21 stolen bases, a 201 ISO, a 109 WRC+. Plus. Those are two really interesting DFS players, and they've been pretty good real-life players. Those are priorities 1 and 2 in a stack of Rockies just because of that kind of output for one, but also for where they hit in the lineup. Ryan McMahon, probably priority number 3, and he comes at very cheap pricing as well. He's been diminished a little bit from where he started out the season, but still making great contact. 16 home runs on the season, could be higher. He's been stuck in the low teens for a little bit, but it's decent output over 442 plate appearances, a 106 WRC+, another effective lefty bat, and again, just very, very cheap at third base. Not a positional blocker in any way to anybody else on the slate. I would love to have some Ryan McMahon there. Chris Bryant, 4,000, 2,400, has not been good at all in his limited 123 plate appearances. Hasn't really been good since joining the Rockies a couple seasons ago, largely due to injury. If he's in the lineup, I'm always tempted to play some Chris Bryant, and with the pricing where it is, 2,400 on FanDuel is just... I'll buy some of the history. Maybe I'm buying the name on the back of the jersey at this point, but he'll be in consideration for a click either at first base or in the outfield. That said, again, Michael Talia is the home run pick of the day. I would much rather have Michael Talia in that lineup. So if it comes down to a decision between the two, I'll spend up to get Talia. Brendan Rodgers for 33.28. Again, better in home games, but he's put together an okay season. The run creation hasn't been there, just a 79 WRC+, but he's hit the ball effectively, 45.2% hard hits. 7 home runs isn't great output, but he's holding down to 263, 310, 384 triple slash. It's an okay level of output for him. Again, Talia is just here to hit home runs, 18 in just 236 plate appearances with a 291 ISO. He's an absolute monster at the plate in terms of that. He strikes out very aggressively. He draws an okay walk rate at 8.1%, but just a 275 on base. He's not even really a 3 true outcomes guy right now. He's just kind of a home run or bust. But I'm buying the home run upside at 3,900 at first base on DraftKings, 3,200 more correct on FanDuel. Doesn't need to be super high priced because he is extremely boom or bust. We've gotten a lot of boom out of him. Elias Diaz, playable catcher, 32-24 across sites, a very decent slash line, just an 84 WRC+, just 5 home runs though. Mix and match caliber, but playable if you're going to Rocky stacks and you need a 5th man where you have to play catchers. A lot less playable on FanDuel, especially with 2 guys that we want to rotate through outfield and first base. And then there's Jake Cave at the bottom of the lineup. Mix and match caliber outfielder, if that. The Angels side of things, Zach Neto, again, is having a very good season. If he's in the leadoff spot, let's see if we got this lineup confirmed on Underdog. I'd like to have this lineup because I think it is an interesting stack. There it is. Beautiful. Let me just type it in. So it's Nolan Chanuel back to the leadoff spot. He's another player who's having a very good little stretch like we looked at yesterday on a nice tear and becoming the on-base machine that he's kind of supposed to be. So a good table setter there. Maybe kind of interesting. God damn it. I think it's H. It's weird when I... Oops. For some reason... Like, I can remember, in a lot of ways, I remember most of the names. I remember, like, people's individual handedness, what they're doing at the plate, what kind of hitter they are, all that kind of stuff. The one goddamn thing I can't tend to remember is whether a Zach spells his name Z-A-C-H or Z-A-C-K. I get it wrong almost every single time. Let's see if I got it right. I did. All right. It's just because I was specifically thinking about that when I had Zach Neto on the board yesterday. That one drives me nuts for some reason. So again, Nolan Chanuel up to a 347 on base has suddenly become relevant. 11 home runs. A handful of them came earlier in the year, but that's a decent home run total for a young player over 408 plate appearances. Just a 130 ISO, but creating runs 8% better than average all of a sudden. Limited premium contact, but low strikeout rate, high walk. He's been getting involved. So if you're going to Angels bats on a day where they do look appealing, but probably are going to be pretty popular, Chanuel's a good way to get your stack started. Luis Rengifo is also an on-base machine, 352 on base. Boy, the Royals could use one of these two guys. 352 on base out of him, 6 home runs, 24 steals. Very relevant DFS player, 119 WRC+. He's a guy I'll grab a lot of the time at a fair price with multi-position infield eligibility and just plug into a lineup as like a stopgap one-off on a day where, like, if I'm going to, say, Framber Valdez plus a 4-man Astros stack, and then I can only I need to put a player on a third team on FanDuel. So I need to go 4-man, 3-man. So whether I'm getting 3 Astros or 4 Astros, whatever it is, if I'm going pitcher and stack is from the same team is the point. He's a guy who's on the board quite frequently for me, just given his very solid output. And he's not all that popular in most cases. In stacks, he'll be more popular than as an individual. Taylor Ward has been greatly diminished recently, but it was a piece on the trade market. Maybe we get a little bit of an uptick now that he knows he's going to be staying at home, doesn't have to pack up his things and move. 16 home runs on the year and 99 WRC plus, but still pretty good contact overall for the year. 13.6% barrels and 42.7% hard hits. Not a bad option. Kevin Pillar is a journeyman outfielder, but he's having a decent 199 plate appearances, slashing 287, 343, 481, creating runs 30% better than average. He's hit 7 home runs and stolen 9 bases. He's a playable part at worst in the heart of the lineup against a pretty weak lefty. Logan O'Hoppe has a lot of catcher power, 14 home runs on the season, a 178 ISO, 121 WRC plus. Very, very good premium contact numbers. Another appealing catcher at just 4,100, 2,800. Again, facing a pretty weak lefty who gives up a 10.2% barrel rate, 41.2% hard hits for the uninitiated. We're looking for 10 plus here, or even for when we're talking about pitchers, if they're giving up like 8 or 9 points of barrel, it's still targetable. We're looking for 40 plus in terms of bad hard hit rate and 90 plus in terms of a bad mile an hour exit velo, and he's above all 3 thresholds. Probably getting pretty lucky to give up just a 3.4% home run rate. So I think he is targetable for righty power through the heart of this lineup. Brendan Drury, a pretty bad 202 plate appearances, but was pretty good for home run upside over the last couple of seasons. Been a rough year for Drury when he's been healthy. Joe Adell, 16 home runs, 13 steals, but very spotty performance. Comes and he goes, but if you catch him on the right day, you could have a monster game. 200 ISO, just an 83 WRC plus, I think reflects that pretty well. You can see the premium contact. He's not expensive. It's a bad spot in the lineup, but again, if we're drawing against Kyle Freeland's premium contact and power, you could probably do worse than Joe Adell, and compared to a bunch of these guys, he'll probably be lower owned. So for a fair price, it's not terrible. Stefanich, I think. Very cheap at second base, but that's really all he is. For me, this is... I'm going to say Rocky's bats on top, just like as a tournament option. I think the Angels will be overpopular and make up the difference. It is a much better run total, obviously, but I'm going to be a little contrarian. I'm going to say Rockies are better than the Angels. Rockies bats, Angels bats. Davis Daniel over Kyle Freeland, but Kyle Freeland is the more interesting play on DraftKings because you're head-to-head between the two value plays here, and he's going to be dramatically lower owned than Davis Daniel for a much, much lower price over there. So to reiterate, he's an interesting value play on DK. Where the prices are closer on FanDuel, I think you just default to Davis Daniel against the Rockies, righty against the Rockies on the road. Always has a little bit of upside. Just know that he's going to be the value play of the day, and he's going to get a little bit popular, and doesn't appear to be all that good. Last game up. A's against the Giants. Ross Stripling, pretty hard no there. Logan Webb, pretty hard yes. Pretty firm yes. Pretty enthusiastic yes, however you want to put that. Webb's another guy who's just spectacular at limiting home runs, limiting launch angle. You can see this year 2.7 degree average launch, 1.24% home run rate against. For guys like this, again, for the uninitiated, I don't care that much about the hard hits in the exit velo because the ball's just always on the ground or at a very low trajectory. So you're dealing with balls that are not hit out of the ballpark by and large. So it's a lot less of a factor. What it can sometimes lead to is some batting average on balls in play. Obviously, if you blast a line drive, a scorching liner through the infield, or a ground ball ripped up the middle, you're going to get some base hits against there. So when Logan Webb has a bad day, that's where it comes from typically. But a 3.72 ERA with a sparkling 3.30 xFIP underneath it. He hasn't been as good a strikeout pitcher this year. Last year it was 22.8%, more like the year before at 20.7%. But he's just effective. 2.90 in against a 3.32 ERA xFIP that year. 3.1 degree average launch with a 1.4% home run rate. 3.25 ERA and a 2.96 xFIP last year with the better strikeout rate over 216 innings because he gives you a lot of depth as well. 0.6 degree average launch, 2.35% home runs. He is very, very good at taking away the one thing that the A's do well, which is hit home runs, and that's only a few of the A's, quite honestly. This team does not sequence. They do not get on base effectively. Even with some of the improved bats in this lineup, that's a 309 on base, which is actually a little bit higher than I thought it was going to be. Bolstered by Max Schumann at the bottom of the lineup. 372 on base out of Brent Rooker is obviously very, very good. Oh, that's a TV show. A note from Apple popped up, and I thought it was like a news note. And it says, Mexico's first female police force hunts a serial killer. And I was like, whoa, that's some crazy news. That's interesting. But it's actually an Apple Plus TV show. So, Webb for 8,600 on DraftKings is just a bargain price. 9,000 on FanDuel, absolutely investing there. 135 and a third innings in 22 starts this season. Gives you very good depth. He only went 5 in his most recent start. He gave up 4 earned runs. Gave up 4 earned runs to Colorado at Coors Field the start before that. The most recent one is against the Dodgers at LA. He also had a bad start, 7 earned runs over 5 innings against Toronto. If you want to talk about, being due for a good bounce back start, this is a great spot to consider that for Logan Webb. There's no actual such thing as due. We're just talking about a very good pitcher against a very bad team. And he's on a run of a couple of bumpier starts than normal, so it'll look like a bounce back. Love the option. Ross Stripling on the other side of it, a 13.8% strikeout rate, a 6.02 ERA, a 4.56 xFIP. Ross Stripling has never really been a consideration for DFS shares. 65 across sites, going up against a capable enough Giant squad with a little bit of pop in the lineup. They're down to Jorge Soler, don't have him anymore, but we still got Lamont Wade, Elliot Ramos, Patty Bailey. There's a lot of decent bats in this lineup. I see no real reason to go to Ross Stripling, and I can maybe get behind some Giants bats. Looking at the A's, it's just a bad spot to stack. Even if they score a few runs, it's probably not due to be a big day. 3 or 4 earned runs maybe on a bad day for Logan Webb. If you're going there, though, Lawrence Butler's an absolute priority off the top. He's been on a bit of a tear. He's up to a 235 ISO, 12 home runs, 8 steals, and 244 chances, a 132 WRC+. He's been a masher. 12.1% barrels and 51% hard hits. He's a high strikeout guy. Could help Webb find some strikeouts here, but very good option off the top of the lineup for, honestly, not a price on either site that's fully caught up. FanDuel's closer. 4,000 on DraftKings. Decent investment if you're going to A's. Miguel Andujar for 44.27 should probably be cheaper than Lawrence Butler. Butler's giving you a lot more DFS scoring, but Andujar's slashing a decent 286, 315, 393. Creator runs 4% better than average. Just hasn't been hitting for the expected power. JJ Bleday, 13 home runs, over 428 plate appearances, a 202 ISO, one of the better power bats on the team. Brent Rooker has been absolutely tremendous this season. We took a good look yesterday at the numbers on just his swing rate and his contact rate on pitches that he swings at, and they've gone up dramatically, which was a big problem for him. While it's only a minor improvement in his actual strikeout rate, 32.7 is down to 30.3. He's walking a little bit more this year. What it's doing for him is just improving the quality and the frequency of contact, and that's really come through in his slash line. 297, 372, 593, a 297 ISO with 26 home runs. Absolutely tremendous. You're absolutely not skipping Brent Rooker if you're stacking up A's. He's the key reason to go to A's, but again, you can see it in his home run mark, just 5.86. Just a little bit over halfway to the magic number. Typically, we're getting Brent Rooker in the 8s and 9s at least, and more often than not, he's hovering around or above 10. Shea Langolier, same thing, below halfway to the magic number. All he does is hit home runs. He's got 20 on the year, a 239 ISO, 15.8% barrels, and 46.4% hard hits. Just a little bit rough to hit home runs against Logan Webb, and he doesn't do much else at all other than strike out. Abraham Toro, mix and match quality player, 6 home runs, 4 steals, and 93 WRC+. Seth Brown, a guy who's really underperforming his talent, hits from the left side. Typically, we're just kind of home run hunting with Brown. He's got 9 on the season, but just a 158 ISO and 88 WRC+. Better hitter than that, but today's probably not the day to find out. Zach with a K, Geloff, 3,400, 2,700 across sites, 13 homers, 12 steals. Sub Mendoza, sub 300 on base, just a 79 WRC+. The counting stats are interesting, but again, tough day to find them. And then Max Schumann, 2,800 across sites, having a good season, over 296 chances, 252, 341, 358, 107 WRC+. One of their more interesting bats, but don't really want him at shortstop. Second base outfield is more in consideration on FanDuel, but you're going to the 9 hitter from the A's against a pitcher that's typically pretty tough to blow up. Probably not the best play on the board. Top of the Giants. I think those of you who have been here before, maybe our new guy in the chat, if he's still here, doesn't know that I absolutely adore Lamont Wade at the top of this lineup, but I definitely do. Very solid on-base guy, 423 on base, over 239 chances this year. Was 373 over the full course of last year, hit 17 home runs. Just a 161 ISO, but 17 homers on that is not bad. 122 WRC plus. Excellent option for correlated scoring with a little bit more power than he's shown us this year. Makes fantastic contact at the plate. 9.3% barrels up from 9.1 last year, 9.5 the year before. A little bit more hard hit so far this year in a limited sample of plate appearances. Very good option to lead off from the left side of the plate against Ross Stripling. Elliot Ramos has been crushing the ball since he came up. 15 homers, a 214 ISO, 16% barrels, and 48.5% hard hits. He has a high strikeout option, but it does not matter really against Ross Stripling. There's going to be a lot of hittable pitches for a guy like Elliot Ramos. So 12.07, very believable. I was close to making him the home run pick of the day. Patty Bailey, 3,900 is very, very cheap for a good catcher. 271, 341, 401 against a bad pitcher, 114 WRC plus, 306 plate appearances of very high quality from Patrick Bailey. You could get a little bit better on the home run total, but he hasn't been bad for long balls, and he's just been involved in hitting the ball with authority. I like the option. Again, for under 4,000 on DraftKings where you have to play catchers, definitely interesting. Tyler Fitz, over 132 plate appearances. He's mashed 9 home runs and stolen 7 bases. Pretty high-end output, but he's supposed to be a hitter. 11.3% barrels, a limited hard hit rate, aggressively 30.3% strikeout rate. But when he's made contact, he's absolutely delivered so far. If you're going to Giants, he's a pretty high priority. I love the option to put him at second base on FanDuel instead of at shortstop and still get a high-end shortstop. But that's less of a concern. Again, today, there are limited shortstop options. So not a bad play. Michael Conforto, Matt Chapman, Mike Yastrzemski, any one of those guys or all three of those guys, honestly, in tandem with one another, you get a ton of double-digit barrel rate, everybody above 40% and well above 40% in terms of hard hits. They're mid-range strikeout guys. Any one of those guys could get got for strikeouts, but again, Ross Stripling's not the guy to go do that. Soft tosser, the ball's just going to be floating there for these guys to mash, and these guys do hit home runs. Everybody has a 180-plus ISO. 10 homers for Conforto, 15 for Chappie with an odd 12 stolen bases at this point. Remember when I was amazed that he had stolen like 3 bases? We're up to 12. Ridiculous. Mike Yastrzemski has 8 home runs and 290 chances, a 188 ISO, 113 WRC+. plus. All 3 of those guys creating runs above average. In this projected lineup, everybody but Brett Wisely has created runs above average this year. This is a 2-catcher lineup with Blake Sable in it. We'll see what they do with the actual confirmed. If Sable's there, it's a mix-and-match play. He is the dead min, and he has outfield eligibility on FanDuel, which is kind of interesting. Last year in 344 chances, he had 13 home runs, a 158 ISO. Not completely dead. That's not a dead stick. I just would much rather have the catcher who hits here for not much more and is a better player. But as an alternative, even that's not terrible. And the fact that you can get him in the outfield on FanDuel is downright interesting. God forbid he climbs the lineup. That would make him really interesting. And then Brett Wisely in the infield, mix and match caliber player. 3 home runs in his 186 plate appearances. You get him for a cheap price, second base and shortstop eligible. Adds outfield to that on FanDuel. And that, gang, is your slate. We managed to still go an hour and a half for our just 5-gamer. But not a lot more to talk about. We'll look at the pitching board one more time. On FanDuel, you do have Logan Webb creeping up to the top of the board, by the way. Dylan Cease outpaces him on the DraftKings slate, but only very, 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 very slightly. 3 tremendous options off the top of the board. All 3 of those guys are going to be very highly owned, which makes me more intrigued by Nick Lodolo, who at the start of the show, before we noticed that, I didn't totally love. And the reason for that, again, is the super high total. Not super high. 4.38 is a very manageable total, but it's higher than a lot of the visiting teams that are facing the other pitchers. I think he's in a high danger spot, but that is entirely wiped out by the fact that he's going to be a quarter as owned as all 3 of the pitchers above him. Framber's excellent. Has a great opportunity to find some upside against the Pirates. Logan Webb we just talked about, but again, tremendous opportunity to limit the home runs from Oakland and find some Ks along the way. Cease just going to be challenged by a couple very good players at the top of the Dodgers lineup, but again, going back to that point, it's a greatly, greatly diminished version of the Dodgers lineup, so I think he's got an opportunity to go out and have another monster day. Kershaw, even with limited pitches, it's baked into the pricing there. I think you can go there. You're just at a little bit of a risk for what does the ceiling look like if one of those other pitchers goes off and has an absolute ceiling day. Even for the savings, you probably fall behind the pace. Davis Daniel, I think, again, is worth probably targeting with some Colorado bats as a low-owned angle into the slate in tournaments. 7,500 versus Kyle Freeland for 7,700. If you're determined to take a discount pitcher, Daniel's the better option on FanDuel. I think it's reversed on DraftKings for the 1,700 savings that you get at SP2. I think I fire up Kyle Freeland and save the money. I really do. Daniel's going to be over-owned on that site. He's not ridiculously cheap like Freeland is. Stripling, Hendricks, and Woodford are just pretty hard nose, even for the price savings on the DraftKings slate. And if you look at it, really only Hendricks saves you money. The other two guys, Stripling and Woodford, are both higher priced than Kyle Freeland. Give me 6 innings, Kyle Freeland. Find your 4 strikeouts. It's just a price-based play and an innings-based play again. I do not think this is a good pitcher. I am uncomfortable even recommending it. But for the price savings that you get out of it on DraftKings, he doesn't have to be perfect. And Davis Daniel kind of does. So I think it's a worthwhile pivot to consider, especially if you're building a lot of lineups. Just like start pressing that Kyle Freeland ownership up a little bit and start pulling the Davis Daniel ownership down a little bit if you're building out like 150. Even if you're building like 20, I think you could do that. If you're building 1 and you're going expensive cheap, I think it's probably a worthwhile pivot. It's just an easy, quick way to gain leverage against the slate while still targeting, again, all of that ownership on Daniel is going to be in tandem with one of these 4 guys. So by virtue of that, you're still targeting all those lineups that will have all that weight with these guys. It's just, you need to pick the right one. If you're pairing him with one of those guys, you need to, obviously not be the guy that blows up there. And then you're just riding with a very thin sliver of the field if you go with Freeland there, and you've bought probably 2 bad upgrades. So it's kind of worth doing. Jake Swale's popping in at the end of the show. Yo, what's going on, buddy? Mamba and Power debating something in the chat there. I was not catching up with what you guys are talking about. Talking about the Vegas line for the Dodgers. The Vegas line does track there minus 125 after a no-hitter. Should be at least minus 175. I don't think that the no-hitter has anything to do with it. I think the line is just created by his quality against their quality. What he did in the last game has very, very little to do with it. Honestly, Mamba, it's probably, if I'm on DK, these guys are cheap enough that I'd love to just see what I could buy bats-wise and just pair those 2 highly owned, high-end pitchers. If I'm going to the bargain bin, I'm probably choosing Freeland over Daniel, just given where Daniel's owned and the savings, everything I was just saying there. But I would strongly consider, if I can afford it, if I don't need to go to the absolute bargain bin, I would strongly consider Clay Kershaw for $500 more than Davis Daniel, because I do think he's got 5-inning plus upside and the ability to book the win there. And if they book the win, it's probably knocking Dylan Cease down a peg. So I could see an angle there. You can find that dual lane of quality. I would not pair him with Dylan Cease in that scenario. But I think that's my answer. It depends on what kind of a lineup you're trying to build. Freeland is, again, not a good pitcher, but he's going up against not a very good lineup, and he's extraordinarily cheap compared to everybody else on the slate who's at all viable. And you're just, again, looking for innings, as we talked about. I'll say it one more time. He did have that stretch of 5 straight quality starts. He's only made 10 starts on the season. His most recent one was bad. But going into that one, he had 5 of his 9 starts were quality starts. That's a pretty good ratio. He was giving you 6+ into the 7th inning. He was finding some strikeouts along the way. It's primarily 3 or 4 strikeouts, but he spiked a 9 strikeout game, and then that ugly one against the Giants, again, did strike out 8. I'm not saying he's good. I'm not saying he's even going to have a good day. What I am saying is he's maybe potentially viable for enough scoring for that cheaper price to be relevant enough at low ownership. So hopefully that comes through. I don't want anybody out there thinking I'm saying Kyle Freeland is good or is worthy of our enthusiasm, but I think the play kind of works out, or has the opportunity to kind of work out. Home run board. Talia drops a spot. He goes down to 10.92. He was 11 plus. He moved down a spot from the projected lineup. Still the home run pick of the day. Still love that option. Got a couple cubbies here. floating just below the magic number, a little bit deceptive for the Cubs, showing definite power upside across Isaac Paredes, Seiya Suzuki, Ian Happ. I like the looks of the right-handed Cubbies. You get Patty Wisdom down here at a bit of a diminished number, but still has tons and tons of power upside as well as a fourth man in. Cody Bellinger not far behind. So you're seeing a lot of pop for the Cubs, just nobody above the actual magic number, but 3 guys just below it. Shohei Ohtani believably leading the day. Elliot Ramos second. Jordan Alvarez, love all 3 of those options. Ellie in here is not a bad option, but he's going to be popular in that Cincinnati lineup that's at the very top of the board. Altuve. Support for the Houston stack as well. There's Bregman, there's Altuve, and Jordan. A lot of obvious names here. Ohapi's a little less obvious maybe. Spencer Steer, Candelario. That's some support for the Cincinnati stack here as well. Not that it needs it. Again, it's going to be very, very popular. But you got 3 guys right there as well. But maybe the other side of that game outpaces it a little bit. Anyway, it's 5:40. I feel like we're just ending early. I'm running out of things to say, though. Suarez 51 is better than Cease no-hitter. I don't know what you mean. Think that's going to be it, guys. Let me wrap things up. I'll jump out and get the lineups and the projections up on the site updated for anybody new. At rotoscouts is the Twitter handle. At digitalbeat21 is just like my personal handle, and mostly these days I just retweet the stuff that comes out of the other handle. But follow at rotoscouts, retweet, like when you see things pop up. Hit the like button here. Check out our pals over at acemind.io as well. If you're looking for an optimizer, if you're looking for sim tools, promo code rotoscouts, all in caps, get you 20% off your first month on some pretty killer products and some pretty low pricing overall. We got football season right around the corner. It's going to be a great year. A lot going on. Definitely important to have good optimizers and sims for that. So with that, guys, good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something. I'll see you tomorrow for what will probably be another short slate on a Getaway Thursday. Adios.